On to you, Mark.
All right. Good afternoon and welcome, all of you. It's really a pleasure to be able to present with you today and to you. It's really with you. We would like to be very clear that any questions you may have, we will have opportunity at the very end. So please do stick with us till the end, and we'll cover as many questions as we can. I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to touch them all. I want to also begin this by acknowledging our funding partner. This webinar is, and the whole project, Gaining New Ground initiative, which is an initiative of Florida Organic Growers, is funded by RAFI, which is a North Carolina nonprofit organization. They were founded in 1990, just a couple years after we started FOG, Florida Organic Growers. And we were working with them even before they were organized formally and have been ever since. So we have quite a history together, and we very much appreciate their forward thinking vision and the funding of this project. So, with that, I'd like to introduce to you two very gracious and very experienced and accomplished speakers. The first is Tamara Cushing, who we affectionately call Tammy. She came to the University of Florida, actually returned back to Florida. She's a Floridian, but she came back to Florida in 2021 and came back to an appointment here at the University of Florida. The overarching theme to her work is helping private forest landowners achieve their objectives. Using her background in forestry and business, Tammy works with private landowners and their advisors to provide information needed to make decisions related to the management of their land. Her extension and teaching responsibilities overlap in coverage of cash flow analysis, Florida economics, and management. You all will definitely get a lot from her presentation, as well as Mr. Chris Demers, who has been here forever. Excuse me, Chris, but he's not that old, but he has been here at the University of Florida serving our agricultural community here in North Central Florida for 25 years, actually over 25 years. He's currently the Extension Program Manager at the UF IFAS School of Forestry, Fisheries, and Geomatics Sciences. I don't even know what that is. And he has held this position for that long, over 25 years. His primary duty at the school is running the Florida Land Seward Extension Program, which you'll hear about today, which provides educational and networking services to private landowners statewide to help and encourage them to actively manage their forest and natural resources. Again, you all will benefit tremendously from this presentation. So take notes, prepare your questions. All will be taken at the end of the program. And at that, I'm going to turn this over to Tammy, and thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. Let me get this thing. There we go. Get the presentation pulled up. But as I get started, I want to make really clear I'm not a lawyer. I did not go to law school. So we're going to cover some stuff today that very heavily leans into law. I think the benefit of me not going to law school is I'm going to put this in language that I hope everybody can understand. And so I just want to be clear where we are today. You should always seek legal help if you're making some of these decisions. So we're going to talk a little bit today about understanding land tenure options. All right, so first off, one of the things that I think it's really important to consider is your goals and objectives, right? So what are you trying to accomplish? The options that are available to you, and then After that, once you know what option you're doing, how can maybe we protect the land in its use over time and protect it from, we're in Florida, development. We're going to be honest about it. So let's look at each of these. The first thing that I like to talk to people about is what is their objective? And of course, when I talk to forest landowners, when I talk to anybody in agriculture, a lot of what we're thinking about is, are you trying to make money? That is a perfect objective for a lot of people. They need to make money, so they need land that is going to match that objective. Maybe their goal or objective with owning land or having land to work on is someplace for a home. Maybe it's to recreate. That could take many, many forms. In my world, that could be a hunting lease. It could be riding the ATV. It could be fishing in the pond. And for others, it's leaving some kind of legacy of taking land and not only maybe improving it or keeping it as it was, protecting it from other threats that might exist. And so I don't want to make it sound like these are individuals. These can all be uh, overlapping, right? I may want to make money on it. I may want to leave a legacy as well, have the home out there and recreate on it. So it's not individual objectives. They can always overlap, one being more important than another. But if you're trying to find a property to do something on, you kind of really need to focus first on what are you trying to accomplish with the property. That may drive your decisions, right? If I need to leave a legacy, I'm likely to look at ownership options. So let's look at some of these ownership types. And the angle I want to take on this is thinking about that knowing how you own the land not only defines who owns the land, it's talking about the individuals or the entities that own the land, but it also goes into the tax implications, right? And so what tax forms have to be filed, whether the entity is paying tax or whether you're paying tax, what forms have to be distributed to show who got income, where the expenses are, all that is part of the tax implications and probably part of the financial implications of it as well. It also determines liability. And if you hear nothing else today, that is a whopper, right? Knowing that if something happens on the land, who can be sued over what's happened out there? That liability issue is going to flow back towards your financial position. Um, Thinking about like, can you protect your personal assets if what you're trying to do out there is more business oriented? So I'm going to present these type of ownership options to you, but I want to make it really clear that there is no one right answer. When I've done live presentations in front of a group of people, somebody inevitably will stand up and say, everybody should have a trust. Everybody should have a LLC. And we'll talk about what those things look like. But there is no one right answer. It all depends. It depends on your goals and objectives, to go back a slide or two. But it also depends on your financial situation, your legal situation, and just entirely is based on everything that you bring to that decision. So again, just to say it loud and clear, get professional advice. So I hope what I can present here is some information for you to say that's not the word form for me, or this is something I need to consider, and I probably need to go talk to an advisor and make sure I understand the pros and the cons of each of these particular ownership types. So the most basic one that we can talk about is sole ownership. And this is, and I say fee simple, this is you own it, right? So this is one individual with legal title. And so that makes it super simple, right? Exclusive right of possession. I own it. I can do what I want on it within the confines, of course, of what's legal, right? Zoning rules and all those kinds of things. So if I start really looking at this super simple way of doing things, there are some pros and the cons, right? The pro, it's very easy. It has no setup cost, basically, right? I own it, I buy it, my name goes on the title. The accounting and the taxes are relatively simple. relatively simple. Again, relative to the fact that taxes aren't very straightforward half the time, and nor is the accounting. But this is the easiest structure, the easiest ownership form to handle these accounting and tax issues. And then, of course, one person makes the decision. So there is no worry about having disagreements about what to do on it. If it's legal, you want to do it, you have the funds to do it, you can decide to do it. So for every pro, there's usually a con, and some of these you can see are just really the inverse of what the pros are. You'll see that as we go on. The con, there's no liability protection for your assets. When you have sole ownership and you have not protected it with an entity, there's no stopping anybody who decides to sue you from going after your personal assets, because your personal and your business assets, barring any kind of legal structure, are one and the same. So this typically, you have one checking account, you haven't differentiated from it, you haven't protected, pulled it off. And so that makes it really easy to go back and forth and not really understand what's the person and what's the business, if you will. We can transfer by deed or will, right? Because it's yours to do what you want with. You have the ability to just say in the will, I'm leaving it to this person. You don't need anybody else to approve that. I said on here the succession planning is harder because there's no built-in involvement of an heir. So if I have one of these other structures I'm going to talk about in a minute, I have somebody already built in who can take over if I'm not there. When I'm a sole owner, I have to consciously make a decision on who's going to be the heir, or state law will decide that for you if you fail to do that. But they're not involved necessarily. So I would have to really work hard to get them brought in and start showing someone the ropes if I wanted to leave an enterprise to them. And then you see, I said it was a pro, but it's also a con that one person makes decisions. So many times you can see where having someone to bounce information off of, just going into a partner, whether it's a spouse or a sibling, and saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What am I missing? Right? So it can be really bad not having anybody else to help you make a decision because you might miss something. So that's why I say it's a pro and a con. All right. So the next level is going joint ownership with right of survivorship. And so this is what happens when you have two or more parties, undivided interest. So we go buy the property and the title goes on it. It all happens at the same time. This can also happen when property is left to the two kids or the three kids, and we don't say that one of them has a different amount than the other. They all have the same amount of ownership. And so we haven't differentiated, but they all took ownership at the same time. So title goes on it at one time. This is an automatic right of survivorship when we do something like this, a joint ownership with right of survivorship. That means that when one of them passes away, it goes over to the others, right? And so they just take over the ownership. In this particular setup, you can transfer with consent. So I can decide to leave it to my child instead of leaving it to you, my spouse, but I would need consent to do that. And so that's kind of what's baked into this. It's not super flexible in that way. So pros and cons again. It is simple still, right? Usually we see this with married couples, low setup costs. Usually there isn't any legal stuff happening. Husband and wife buy a property, their names go on it. The accounting and taxes are simple. Ownership transfers immediate upon death. You do not need probate to do this, and it's because it was left with right of survivorship. The owners are going to share liability. That's where things get messy. That means the other person can get you into debt, and both parties are responsible for it. You do have to have consent to sell or encumber the property. It is always considered an equal share. So 2 people, 3 people always are going to share the same amount. It can trigger an estate tax. That's usually going to be for that second person. And again, it's less flexible than a TIC, a tenancy in common. We're going to talk about that next. So tenancy in common is two or more parties, again, with an undivided ownership right. They have equal use and possession, but they may not have the same percentage ownership. So the percentage ownership can be different, but we haven't said, here's 100 acres, one owns 40 acres, one owns 15, and whatever the difference is. We haven't done that. So they all own it, but they can come in at different times, which makes it a little bit different, right? And part of that's because the owner can sell without consent. So I can sell my ownership to an unrelated party. At death, my ownership would pass to my heir, whoever I designate, and I don't need the other party to approve it. Pros and cons. Again, we're still fairly simple as far as like a setup. Setup costs are fairly low. The accounting and the taxes are relatively easy. I say relatively. The further this goes down the line, so I leave it to my heirs, my heir leaves it to their heir, you could start to see that kind of spread in the number of people increasing, making the accounting and the taxes more complicated. Co-owners can own different proportions. Again, that's partly due to, I first get it, I leave it to my two kids. Each kid has, one kid has three, one kid has four kids. You could see the proportions start to change. You do need probate to validate this, but the owners can sell or gift without consent, which brings in the potential for unrelated owners, which brings in potential for all kinds of problems, right? What started as friends or siblings turns into, I just want out, I sell it to the highest bidder. You don't know who that person is. They turn around, and you can start to see how you lose control a little bit. Owners can demand their share of fair market value at any time. So I could decide I want out. If you can't buy me out, I can force the sale so that I can get out. And that is where problems really occur. All right, so now we're going to go into some where we start getting a little bit more legal. We start putting agreements to things. So partnerships, this is a co-ownership with the establishment of an organized entity, which is the partnership. Each partner is liable for all the debts of the business. And what happens is you're conducting business as co-owners for profit. That's the only way it becomes a partnership. So there has to be this kind of profit motivation. The partnership interests are going to pass to heirs if there's no written buy-sell agreement. So if you want to make sure that there's right of first refusal to buy the partner's interest before it goes down to the heirs, that needs to be in the partnership agreement. Again, this you see we're starting to get a little bit more formal. Pros and cons. When there's partners, you can pool finances, you can share brain power, you can share the workload. The accounting and taxes are still relatively simple. There's not a whole lot of rules and regulations regarding partnerships compared to some of the more complex stuff. There's no rules governing allocations of profits, losses. That's totally up to the partners. So we can allocate losses heavier to one person and profits heavier to another, whatever floats your boat. Cons, you share liability. Any partner can bind the partnership contractually without consent. You do not have to have a written agreement. I say that's a con. I think that's a bad thing, but you should do it anyway. You can terminate at death. It may terminate at death, bankruptcy, or the exit of one partner unless everybody agrees to continue. No requirement for buy sell. And then again, we can force the sale. Another form is just a family limited partnership. It's usually made of family members. And then you can decide within this family limited partnership to make partners general or limited. That has to do with the amount of control. It also has to do with decision making. But it's a way to allow younger people in and have some ownership without having any responsibilities. You can see the pros and cons. These are starting to sound fairly familiar, but one of the pros, allowing sharing of ownership with the next generation. The limited partners can't sell, so that means the younger ones, if you give them a limited, they can't sell without the general consent. And there's some discounted valuation, which can help with gifting. Big one, though, is you're controlling where liability is. All right, you'll have this slide, so you can read the cons. I don't think that's anything novel. We start going up, we get into corporations. It starts to bring in the good stuff of corporations and the good stuff of partnerships. The good stuff of corporations is usually the liability protection. The good stuff of the partnerships is usually tax related. So you see everybody has limited liability protection. That's good. And on the cons, we start looking at it costs more, and then laws are varying by state on how we set these things up. Beyond that, we really start getting into very, very tax-oriented type of things. S corps are corporations are taxed like a partnership with corporate liability protection. The big thing here is it's avoiding double tax, which is what we see with C corp problems, and it has limited liability protection for all. There's a little bit of flexibility loss on this. That's something to keep in mind. Again, I think these are getting heavier. And so if you're just starting out, these are probably not where you're at. C Corp, I think most people know what C Corps are. It does have a lot more liability protection under it, but it has double tax, right? And so the entity will pay tax, and then the shareholders, or like if you get a stock dividend, you pay tax on that. The corporation paid it, and you pay it. Trusts. Everybody wants to talk about trusts. These are written documents. There are a lot of ways to do a trust. They all have very distinct purposes and then rules regarding the assets. So that does give you flexibility when you're establishing it. You can do it during life, or you can establish it at death. Different purposes for setting each one up. All right, so I want to talk about leases as opposed to ownership for just a second. Mark, I'm working on it.
I see you.
Um, Leases are really a contract between an owner and a tenant, the tenant having a very specific need to do something. The owner still has the ownership right, but they're allowing you to do something. So there's usually a couple ways of payment. It's usually some kind of rent or a share of crop. But all these contracts are going to say a specified period of time and what you can use it for and what you cannot use it for. Should you lease? It's more affordable. It gives you the option sometimes to turn the lease into an ownership agreement. So that might be something that might be good for you to think about. And it gives you different cash flow and tax benefits to think about. But if you want to change something out there, it's going to potentially be more difficult to change infrastructure. If you spend the money on infrastructure changes, know that you spent money on something that doesn't belong to you. Or if you try to get the owner of the land to do it, they may or may not be willing. There's no guarantee past your lease term that you'll be able to renew, and you may not be able to change what you're doing. So if you are trying different things, this may not work. What's right? Again, back to your goals and circumstances. Are you looking for simplicity, liability protections? You should always consider that. Taxes, control, what's most important. All right. I'm going to go through conservation easements rapidly just because I think it's a way for people, especially in Florida, we talk about these. If you think about owning land as a bundle of sticks, the right to do something, the right to own the land, we're talking here about giving some part of that up, right? So an easement is a voluntary legal agreement that restricts some use. Usually the use we see here in Florida is development. That is majority of why we have a conservation easement. So you can donate it or you can sell at least one of the rights. That would put you in a conservation easement. The landowner is going to retain most of the private property rights, but they are going to give up usually that right to development. There are potentially tax benefits. But the nice thing about this is it allows you to keep the land and continue to work it or do what you want on it other than development. The agreement's going to spell out what rights you hold and what rights you have given up. It's going to stay with the land because they're usually in perpetuity. Your partners could look like the Nature Conservancy, any number of state, local, federal land trusts, national land trusts, and then government agencies periodically will do this. So conservation easements are just one way to take what you have in the land and kind of protect it so that it doesn't turn into a Walmart or something in the future. So, with that, rapid fire through some legal stuff. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Chris to talk about some more fun stuff.
Thank you very much, Tammy. We appreciate that. That's beautiful. You covered a lot of ground.
It was a lot of ground.
Yes, ma'am. Chris, go for it.
All
Thank you.
right. Very good. Thanks, Mark, for having us. Great job, Tammy. Thanks for covering all those bases. I need to acknowledge another faculty that I work with at the school. In addition to Tammy, I work pretty closely with Dr. Michael Andrew, who is a associate professor of forest systems here. He has extension responsibilities across the state, works a lot with forest systems, urban forestry, restoration ecology, and things like that. So I need to also acknowledge him in my presentation on this. So we're going to get into Greenbelt. Tammy talked about some of the tax concerns that we have with owning, managing land, and property taxes are one of the big ones, of course. And it's something that we can manage depending on our situation and our objectives in what we're doing. And one thing we need to cover first is this big question that a lot of people have about green belt and agricultural assessment is this is this a tax exemption? And unfortunately, we're not talking about a tax exemption. We're talking about a tax reduction, perhaps. And that word ad valorem up there is basically Latin for an estimated an approximate value assessment. So in this case, we're talking about an approximate estimated value for an agricultural operation, and that estimated value, that approximate value for an agricultural exemption is what we're talking about when we're talking about assessing the value for taxation. So this is a tax reduction based on a use value assessment, and we're basically shifting property tax property tax burdens to other classes of property. So instead of paying the fair market value, paying taxes on the fair market value of a property, we're talking about paying taxes on the agricultural value of that property. And of course, this is something that's used not only in Florida, this is used across the country in other states, basically as an incentive for agricultural producers to keep their land in agricultural production. Because obviously, if you're paying taxes on the fair market value of property, that value is so much higher than the income that you can make on taxes, and you're going to end up paying much more in taxes than you're making off of your agricultural production. So the purpose of this is to keep property taxes at a manageable level for agricultural producers. And so the Greenbelt Law looks like this. It's Florida statute 193.461. You can go in there and look at it, and I'll be sharing a link to a page where you can access that as well as other resources at the end of my presentation. But agricultural producers are taxed at the income earning potential of the land that's in agricultural production rather than what a willing buyer would pay for that land, which is fair market value. And this is a statewide assessment, and it's interpreted um, relatively widely across the state. So this law mandates that only lands primarily used for bona fide agricultural purposes, and we're going to get into that a little bit. What is bona fide agricultural purposes? Can be classified as agricultural. So bona fide agricultural purpose is good faith commercial agricultural use of land. The land is being used for some kind of agricultural purpose, and that's a very broad area that we're talking about. Agriculture includes a lot of different types of things, with the intent to make a profit for the owner or shareholders or so forth. And as I said, this is interpreted widely across the state by county. And of course, the reason for that is, Florida is a big state and there's a lot of different kinds of dirt and a lot of different climates across the state and different types of agricultural operations going on, from cattle operations to pine management. And that bottom picture is an orchid um, production enclosed down in Homestead. And those are landowners that are actually in our program as well. Um, so we're talking about a wide variety of agricultural uses in state. And these are the types of things that we want to be thinking about when we're applying for agriculture, or these are the kinds of things that your property appraiser is going to be thinking about when they're considering whether or not to grant a greenbelt assessment to an agricultural operation. Things like length of time that the land's being used. How long has this operation been going on? Are you all of a sudden planting pines and asking for a tax break, or is this something that you're doing in good faith for some length of time? Has this use been continuous? Is this an agricultural legacy that's being passed on? Are you starting a legacy? Are you starting an operation that's gonna have some life, some tenure to it? They're really going to be looking closely at the temporal factor of this. How long is this operation happening? How long has it been happening? What's the size and the scale of the operation? And is it appropriate for the specific crop that you're growing? And is there effort made on the part of the landowner, the manager, to be operating in accordance with accepted commercial agricultural practices? So are you putting in the appropriate mechanical or chemical inputs? Are you planting? Are you using fire? Or is there some kind of active management that's taking place that that can be used as evidence that you are in fact managing a crop on this land? And of course, when we're talking about organic farming, are you building soil? What are you doing to manage pests and things like that? So some evidence of active management. And then, of course, is the land being leased and what are the terms of the lease? And there's a number of other factors that we're not going to get too much into in this presentation for the purposes of this presentation. Um, you might be wondering, what really am I going to be saving with an agricultural assessment? And as we say, as Tammy said more than once in her presentation, is as we all say in natural resources, it depends. It depends on what you're doing, what kind of crop you're producing, what's around you. Are you someplace where you're surrounded by urban development and you're a very small farm? It really depends on the situation, but I'm providing this example. This is just an example that's cited in this EDIS publication. EDIS is our extension publication portal where we put a lot of our extension publications that are produced. We've got a publication on there about the Greenbelt and how to apply for a Greenbelt, and they have this example in there from Bay County. And you can see that value is orders of magnitude that you can save. So it's a significant tax savings for the landowner, but it's not free. It's not something that you can just fill out a simple application and be granted. You have to prove that you are in fact doing bona fide agriculture. How do you apply? All right, it really starts, you're going to be starting by contacting your county property appraiser, and that link right there, and that's in the handout as well. That'll take you to a page where you can find your county, you can find your property appraiser, and it's going to be an application, and the property appraiser is going to be, paying you a visit and looking at the operation, and they're going to be making, a determination. It probably take some time. And what you'll want to have handy for the property appraiser and as a part of this application are, some records, provide some records of crop sales, what kind of equipment, some, receipts, what are you having to buy in order to keep this operation going? You're going to have to establish that this is a bona fide agricultural operation, and any records that you have that can prove that are going to be needed. So it will take some time, and it's something that you'll want to start sooner than later. But in general, the application for this must be made between January 1st and March 1st for the Greenbelt assessment in the following year. So it's not something that you're going to get immediately. It's going to take about a year for the assessment to take place. And then once you have that assessment, it's renewed every year, and you have to basically file for the renewal. Yeah, as long as you're maintaining your operation and not much is changing, that renewable, it can be relatively painless. So. Um, for more information, resources on that, you can go to our Florida Land Steward website. We've got a part of that site that's dedicated to financial planning and property taxes and Greenbelt, and we've got several resources in there that link to the county appraiser offices there. We've got a short video about Greenbelt that we put together, and some other things. So visit that. All right, well, I'm going to switch gears a little bit here and talk about our program, the Florida Land Steward Program. And stewardship is a word that we tend to throw around quite a bit, but we don't really talk about what it means. So what exactly is stewardship? Stewardship is taking care of something that we don't own. So we either we don't own what we're stewarding, or we own it for a limited time. So it's that time factor again, and that's something that's in common with the Greenbelt determination, is that factor of time. Are we doing this as something for a limited activity, or is it something that we're in it for the long haul? Are we carrying on a legacy? And that's kind of what it comes down to, is we're managing land for for a long period of time. We're carrying on a legacy that's been handed down to us, or we're starting a legacy. We might be buying a property, and we want this land to be providing long-term benefits for us, our family, our heirs, and ultimately these benefits transfer on to the community and the state in terms of environmental quality, economic value, and social value. And our motto that we put it in our newsletter and all of our email updates is it starts with getting a plan, a management plan, either a plan that's in your head or it's written down, and staying connected to resources. So to me, success with stewardship kind of has a three prongs. So the first prong, and as Tammy talked about in her presentation, is the landowner and what that landowner wants to do. What are your objectives? So that's really where it starts. Is are you carrying on a legacy? Is this property being handed to you? Is it something that you're just buying and you have visions about what you want from it? Maybe you don't have that much knowledge about land management and you're looking for ideas. And landowners in our program come from a wide variety of backgrounds. It's a very diverse audience. Hard to say what is a landowner. It's a wide variety of people and backgrounds. Second part of that's or the second leg of that stool is kind of your initial contact. So if you're new to land management, or perhaps you've inherited property but you don't know what you're doing, is your first level of contact, and that could be with private consultant. Perhaps it's a consultant that your family has worked with. Maybe it's a consultant that you've just found or met. Maybe it's your county forester that works with the Florida Forest Service. Maybe it's the Fish and Wildlife biologist with the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. Maybe it's a USDA agent with their NRCS. There's a whole bunch of folks out there that work with landowners, that help with landowners to manage their land. And that first point of contact is kind of that second rung of the stool. And then the final piece is kind of all the connections that come after that first contact, or that might come after that first contact. And this is kind of where our program comes into play, is the connection to not only the natural resource professionals that are out there to help you, but all the information, other landowners, that connection to our peers, our other landowners. This is where things start to click for people, and where they get it inspired to try different things or maybe consider an objective or a management technique or a crop or something out there that they hadn't thought of before. And so when they're getting some of our resources coming to our events, they're making new connections. They're harnessing that network, the power of that network to basically give them ideas and point them in different directions. And it's all really helpful for people. That we've had a lot of landowners in our program that point to things that they've learned in the newsletter, in our blogs, or in our events where things just clicked, and all of a sudden they've got this whole new lease on life, on the lease on their management. So I'm going to go through some of the deliverables that we have in our program. This is our quarterly newsletter that we produce. It goes out every quarter. It's a Florida Land Steward newsletter where we talk about, where we cover different topics, talk about the latest cost share programs, new technologies, recognize landowners that are doing good things. So it's just a good way to keep up with what's going on out there in the stewardship world. This is our website, the Florida Land Steward website, and those are all the different categories of things that we have. And I encourage you to visit that site and browse around. This is where you can connect with the newsletter, our news blogs, get connected to the email updates from our website. You can get connected to all the regular resources that we have available. We put out a blog every week, just about every week or every other week, where we talk about events that are coming up, cost share programs. We recognize landowners that are doing great things in these updates, talk about resources, programs, online courses, and things like that. And that's all connected to our Facebook page, and that's where again, we recognize landowners. This is our landowner of the year this year, the Young Family Farm over in Putnam County. We're going to be doing a tour over there on March 26th. And our Facebook page is a good way to keep up with what's happening out there in the stewardship world. We have well, I'm calling it new. It's been around now since around 2023 or so. It's a self-paced asynchronous online course, basically a crash course in forestry for forest landowners, where you can get a good background on forestry if you don't have a good background in this topic. Everything from understanding your resources, how to develop a plan, what goes into developing a plan. Talk about all facets of timber management, marketing forest products, non-timber forest products, things like pine straw, carbon markets, hunting leases, things like this, other forest resources. We have estate planning, succession planning, and Tammy covers that in this online course. And we just launched a new module on forest health. It's brand new, just started, and everyone who's enrolled has access to that. And of course, it's available if you enroll. The cost of the course is $150, which is a pretty good value for a university course. Do I got 2 minutes, Mark?
Oh, you're good.
Okay, all right. I'm almost done here, so
You're good. You're good. Fine. Just call.
all right, all right. Each year we produce a calendar with our partners, and our partners are a number of organizations, private and public organizations out there. Basically, the thing that we all have in common is we're trying to reach private landowners with either cost share programs or information or connections. We produce this calendar every year, a wall calendar, and it has a variety of tools and resources, connections in the calendar, links to different things about best management practices to protect water quality and wildlife, financial and technical assistance programs, a variety of things. So we produce this every year, and it's distributed via our program as well as our partners, the Florida Forest Service, the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Services, which is an agency of the USDA, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, their partners program, which interfaces with landowners. We all work together to get put this calendar together and then get it out to our audience. Some programs that are kind of an inroads to our program is the state forest stewardship program, which is administered by the Florida Forest Service. This basically provides a management plan for private landowners and recognition for good stewardship they get assigned on their property. Landowners that are in the stewardship program are entered into our list, our mailing list, and our email updates. The Florida Tree Farm Program, which is a certification program that's affiliated with the Sustainable Forestry Initiative and PEAT, the program for the endorsement of forest certification programs worldwide. Wood that comes off of tree farms is a part of the chain of custody of the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. That's a whole nother presentation altogether. But landowners that are certified in the tree farm program, you've probably seen that green sign around with recreation, wildlife, and water. These landowners are also a part of our network. And then the Wildlife Habitat Recognition Program, you might have seen this sign around out in the back roads. This is the Wildlife Habitat Recognition Program that's by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. So landowners that are doing a good job with restoring habitat, managing for different species, they can be recognized in this program. And these landowners are also part of our network. So it's all about serving landowners across the state, a wide variety of landowners all over the state, from cattle ranches to timber producers, pine rocklands down in South Florida. There's kind of a spread of different objectives and landowners out there. But thank you for your attention, and thanks, Mark, for having us present. We're happy to answer some questions.
I've got one quick question for you, Chris, and then I've got one quick one for Tammy, just to clarify some things you said.
Okay.
The quick question for you, Chris, is you mentioned cost share a number of different times. And with the organic certification program, we also have a cost share program. So I wanted to take the opportunity to see about, let's unpack a little bit about cost share, because that's money coming back. Tammy and you all talk about taxes, which is money going out. Let's talk about the money coming back. So can you clarify that? What are these cost share program? What's this?
Yeah. So the cost shares are incentive programs that are administered by different agencies and non-government organizations as well. The largest source of cost share funding really comes from the USDA. So and a lot of that comes from the Natural Resources Conservation Service through what's now called the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. This is a whole suite of objectives that they're trying to manage for really their habitat management goals, water quality type goals. That's the biggest source of cost share of funding. And basically what that is that they'll pay for a portion of the cost of a management practices. So they'll cover 75% of the cost of prescribed fire or putting in fire lines or timber stand improvement, things like that. The Florida Forest Service is another source of funding. They have different programs. Every year they have something called the Southern Pine Beetle the Southern Pine Beetle Prevention Program, where they will cover or help cover the costs of things like prescribed burning, planting more resistant species of trees like longleaf pine that are a little bit less likely to get infested with southern pine beetle. They have the Future Forest Program, where they're trying to basically help landowners establish forest stands around the state, and they'll cover similar types of costs for planting, burning, active management. Some entities like the Forest Landowners Association have cost shares for planting longleaf sometimes, And basically, my program, I keep track of a lot of these programs as they're coming. When the sign up periods come along, we announce them, and hopefully landowners take advantage of those opportunities.
That's one good reason to keep on your newsletter. You do that, I see very regularly, and I like that.
Yep.
So thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Tammy, you mentioned in your presentation the word entity. And of course, I know what that is. You know what that is. but a lot of people might not know what is an entity, because you talked about a number of them in your presentation.
Sure. That's a great question. Thanks for calling me on jargon. So a lot of times what we do, we're acting on our own or for our family. And so, an entity, when I was using it, a lot of times I was talking about the enterprise, right? So if I am a business owner, then that would be my entity. And the legal structure of that entity could be that it is an LLC or it's a partnership. So we tend to think of an entity as being like a business, or I guess maybe the more familiar language in your world might be an enterprise, right? So you could kind of interchangeably kind of use that language. Like, what do you try? Like, my enterprise is that I am a beekeeper and I'm selling my honey at the street, right? I see that as I'm driving back roads. That people got honey or eggs, the little farm stands. If you were to consider that kind of the business or the entity, so if we roll that into some kind of legal structure.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you. Kendra, do you have any questions? Because I've got a few if you don't.
So I am not seeing any in the chat. If anyone who is on the call would like to ask a question, feel free to drop it into the chat. You can also come off mute. Um, for now, Mark, I guess I'll turn it to you to ask another question, and then we can see if anyone
Okay.
unmutes or puts one in the chat.
Yeah, I've got a few here. So many people, of course, our audience, primarily we are directed towards organic producers, but we'll take anything. We're also big on transition producers. But the question here is in reference to the Greenbelt qualification. Here's the question: if I'm farming organically using compost, cover crops, and no chemical inputs, etc., does that still count as a bona fide agricultural use under the Greenbelt rules and regulations?
No, absolutely. Yeah, as long as you can show that your operation is a bona fide agricultural operation, and bona fide agricultural operation doesn't necessarily mean using any particular type of inputs or outputs. It's really about what are you producing, how are you producing it, how long are you producing it, what are the aspects of your management that really are evident, provide evidence that you're managing an operation, an agricultural operation. So yes, absolutely. An organic operation is absolutely an example of a bona fide agricultural operation. And there's several, and I can think of examples that I've been to that are in fact bona fide agricultural operations, and they have Greenbelt assessment.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's good. And so my assumption, based on what you've just said, is that having being certified as organic is going to be a positive, and it will be an asset in terms of your Greenbelt qualification. Is that correct?
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, Mark, because that certified part is can really help with establishing a bona fide evidence of a bona fide operation. Certified organic. I mentioned a couple of certification programs with timber management. We have the tree farm. If you're a certified tree farm, you're obviously doing what you need to do. You have a long-term plan. You're actively managing your resources. If you're in the forest stewardship program, you're certified that you're managing for a long-term benefits out of that forest. So yeah, certified organic, certified forest, certified wildlife habitat. Those are all evidence of long-term bona fide operations.
Excellent. Okay, good. So, Tammy, this might be more appropriate, but either one of you, of course. But have you really stressed the written the plan. You stressed plan, and I'm asking about written. So, no, here's the question: would having a written organic system plan or broader land stewardship plan help support the Greenbelt classification or strengthen my long-term tax position?
I'll answer from the tax standpoint. I mean, I assume this is going to go for Greenbelt too, but part of the game in income taxes is to show you're trying to make a profit of some sort, and having a plan indicates that you've thought things through, right? Whether it's a forest management plan, a stewardship plan, probably your organic plans. It's that it's not just something I'm playing around with on the weekend. It's something I've thought about. I have a place I'm trying to get to. We usually in forestry, we assess where we're at today and where are we trying to get to and what do I got to do to get there. That shows evidence that, this isn't just a fly by night thing or a tax shelter. And so, one of the things I say way too often, besides it depends, is about facts and circumstances and looking at the whole story, not just one piece of evidence, but all the pieces of evidence. So, you could be certified, but then everything else you do just tells me that, you went through the motions, you got certified, but you're not following anything. And, it's not really a profit motive for you. So the IRS looks at multiple things. I would assume Greenbelt would be also taking into account several things.
Yeah.
Yep, I would agree with Tammy on that. Yep.
Yeah. Part of the organic certification program, I mean, the mainstay of the whole certification process is what we call the organic system plan. So it's a written plan, it has to be written. And so I think this is, excuse me, I'm seeing, these things dovetailing together very nicely. Everything y'all have said, and it's really part of the organic program as well. Everything you've said, it just enhances the organic program
Want
significantly.
to log in, grab onto that written word written, right? Because,
Hmm.
I talk to people and they're like, yeah, I know what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, can you show it to me? And they can't, right? And so, it needs to be written. Like I have a plan to do a lot of things until it's in writing. I haven't conveyed it to anybody. And so having it in writing is just a different level. If you're trying to do something in a business fashion, it's in writing.
Yeah, that's right. I can't agree with you more. Get it out of your head and on the paper, and then it becomes something.
Yeah, and it tells other people, right? It's, if you're not around to tell somebody, there it is. It's very clear what you were doing.
Hmm. Yeah. I guess I could just there's another question here. It's kind of a detail, but if I'm selling, and a lot of growers are in this category, well, I think this might be a good question actually. If I'm selling at a farmer's market or through a CSA, community support agriculture, or direct to consumer, and my revenue is modest, which most growers are starting, that's the way it starts. What documentation should I keep to show that I'm operating commercially with intent to make a profit?
That's a great question. And so one of the things I would say is, you're doing what a reasonable business would do like that when they're trying to make a profit. So if I look around at forest landowners, they're trends, right? You see them doing very, very similar things, right? They're enrolling in Greenbelt, right, to lower their property taxes, right? So, I'm doing what I can to increase my income, but I'm also doing what I can to lower my expenses. And so you're keeping records on both ends of that, right? So the profit doesn't have to happen every year per the IRS, right? But you have to be attempting to get there. And so you're showing that you're doing the things that it would take to get there. I hear about this uh, more more productive seed, that I go to that more productive seed because it has lower loss rates, right? It's going to give me um, more of it's going to produce. And so I use that knowing that it's going to help me get a higher profit. Yeah, it might come with a little bit of extra expense, but it should pay off, right? But if it doesn't pay off, then I switch back off of that, right? So all my decisions are showing I'm trying to do something to make money, even though the money is modest. There's nothing that says you have to make a killing in any of these businesses. It just needs to be profit seeking.
Yeah, that's very good clarity. I appreciate that. That's excellent. Um, Chris, did you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I'll just add that and this might be the case with an organic plan. The with a forest management plan, you've got a timeline. So in year one, you're going to be burning. In year two, you're going to be thinning. In year three, and doing things in different stands. So it's not you're not getting an income every year, but that management plan shows what you're doing each year to get to those goals. So just kind of support what Tammy just said. That
Yeah,
agree.
yeah, that's right. And in organic we have timelines. I
Mhm.
mean, you have a 3-year timeline before you can even apply for land unless it's virgin land. If it's been farmed previously, you got a 3-year transition period. And so, yeah, everything in agriculture. There's one thing about agriculture. If you're not watching the time, then you're missing it,
Mhm.
because everything's timing in agriculture.
Mhm.
You got to be dialed in to the timing of Mother Nature.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think we've about exhausted our fun time together. Um, I've got just a couple things just to say to everyone in closing here. This is the first webinar in a series of 3, and this webinar, as all of our series, will be posted on our Florida Organic Growers YouTube channel. And all the show notes and everything that Tammy and Chris talked about will also be included there. All the links and things like that, they'll be all there perpetually. So you can share this with your friends, even if they didn't come to the program. You can share it with your friends. Let them know that these resources are available. And of course, if you have the opportunity to get in touch with Chris or Tammy, you'll have to run fast to catch Tammy, but but you will have an opportunity to get some FaceTime, and get a phone call or something like that. They are resources, and of course they're very busy, but this is what they're here for. They're here to serve the agricultural community, and they have been exceedingly gracious. In the history that I've had, I've been working with extension agents for more than 50 years myself in my farming operations, and they are the most gracious and knowledgeable people that you'll ever come in contact with. So this is a golden opportunity, and I hope you all take advantage of it. I want to thank both Tammy and Chris again for being so gracious and being a part of this program. It's been great. Kendra, do you have anything else to say? Because I can't read any of these notes that you're shooting to me.
Just to say thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you to all for joining us today. As Mark said, we'll be posting a link on our YouTube channel, and we'll be sending out an email with more details about upcoming events. Back
Oh
to you,
yeah,
Mark, to sign us off.
yeah. One more thing is that we will also be sending a very short little survey. It'll take maybe a minute or two, and we would really like for you to please return that survey to us when you get it in the email that's going to be coming after this webinar sometime shortly. We're get it out to you as soon as possible. That's it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you again, both Tammy and Chris. We appreciate you very much. All right.